is the All Things Strange podcast. We are your hosts, Agent Anderson and
Agent Ether.
Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can find all of our wonderful links in the description on the Linktree, where you can find our Patreon, our Discord, our merchandise, and more. This week's episode, Directed Energy Weapons. Have you heard of this one, Agent Ether?
Yes, because you told me about it.
Oh, okay, well, that makes it easy then. You are now an expert.
No, I did hear about it because I know that, Marjorie Green Taylor thought that there were lasers burning down forests in California, but that was the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah, we'll get to that one. It's in here. It's in our notes for sure. But before we get started, I have to mention we've got two wonderful tiers of Patreon for you. The first tier will get you early access, bonus episodes, and after hours, coming in at a paltry $3 a month. And our second tier for $5 will allow you to vote on upcoming topics such as this one. This time around, I put it up against a UFO topic, but they actually chose directed energy weapons. So there you go. We're doing directed energy weapons.
I miss UFOs. Can we do Blue Book?
Well, I put it up there. They don't vote for it.
That is a shame. Vote for Blue Book for Agent Ether.
Well, what we could do is we could do an extra one to kind of get ahead of the game. So we could do like an extra episode so that we have one in the bag for when we, can't record that week or whatever.
I like it.
And then we could just do a Blue Book. So it would be an extra episode so they won't get upset if they don't get a vote on it.
Yeah, don't be sad. We'll do episodes.
Yeah, we keep doing episodes. This one's only a week late and a day, but...
Yeah, apologies. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, it's just been busy. What can you do? You guys know how it is. Well, let's get into it. Directed energy weapons, basically a weapon that uses some form of energy rather than projectile. Would you like to read that definition I got there for you?
Directed energy weapons are systems that use focused electromagnetic energy or particle beams to damage or disable targets without firing a physical projectile. These weapons encompass high-energy lasers, high-power microwaves, millimeter wave weapons, and particle beams, each operating within specific regions of the electromagnetic spectrum. They offer several potential advantages over conventional weaponry, including speed of light engagement, pinpoint accuracy, virtually unlimited magazine capacity, and lower cost per shot as they rely on energy rather than on physical ammunition.
Why is this goofball playing on our cables?
I would like to let the audience know that our dog, Topster, is on both my battery charger and getting tangled up in my headphones.
He's rolling around down there in the cables. I don't know what he's doing. He's such a goofy guy.
Moving on.
Yeah, so there are a couple of weapons that are sort of in between, where it's not a conventional weapon that uses an explosive charge to propel something, like the coil gun, rail guns, Gauss rifles, etc., stuff like that. There are even plans. They drew up the plans. They haven't built it. They probably never will. But there is a plan, or a design, I should say, to launch people into space using what is basically a large magnetically powered cannon.
Didn't they make a movie about that?
Yeah, what is that called? Where they go to the moon?
Yeah.
They shoot a bullet at the moon.
Yeah.
With people in it, like the ship looks like a big giant cannon shell or something, and then it hits the moon in the eye. What is that? That's like a really famous movie.
It's all artsy fartsy. I don't know.
Is that a French movie? I don't know. Anyways, they have plans to actually build that, so that's cool. But the barrel would be extremely long because otherwise people would be turned to a paste with from the acceleration. So they have to accelerate you very gently to get you up to speed. There's also something called the Arc Flash Labs GT1 Anvil. This is a 20-pound coil gun that kind of looks like an assault rifle. You can buy one for $4,000. and it has an output power equivalent to an air rifle, which is not bad.
Well, for $4,000, that's a lot of money for an air rifle.
Well, that's not what I mean is it's a portable coil gun
Right.
that you could buy right now if you wanted to. And because there's, the United States has a strange technicality. If the projectile is not propelled by explosives, then it's technically not a gun. So
no combustion, not a gun?
yeah, exactly. So this thing isn't even really regulated. It's kind of like a BB gun. You could just go buy one if you wanted to.
That's a little nuts.
Buy like this really high-tech scientific gun, but it's also 20 pounds, so you're not going to be running around too much with it.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't sound like much, but trust me, it is for a gun. It's going to be really hard to aim that thing. So railgun or other types of these things don't have explosives. They rely on kinetic energy to do their damage. They can have a muzzle velocity much higher than conventional weapons, up to 7,800 miles per hour, with 50 megajoules of energy. The fact that there's no explosives makes it a lot safer against enemy attacks, and the low-mass projectiles have potentially greater range and accuracy with similar destructive power compared to conventional weapons. Because like if you don't have a room in your battleship full of explosives and the enemy hits you, then those things could explode. But if you just have a bunch of magnetic projectiles, well, not much happens, right? So it's a safer design, and it's, possibly cheaper, like we mentioned earlier. There are all sorts of uses for these guns, such as missile defense, but I just wanted to mention that because those are kind of in between. I feel like they're almost like directed energy. They're not quite conventional, and they're really kind of fascinating. So I just wanted to mention that real quick. But let's get to some directed energy weapons. Yes.
So we do have lasers, and everyone knows they're not science fiction anymore. And the acronym is Light Amplification by Stimulated Emission of Radiation. So lasers certainly works much better. And everyone knows pretty much what it is. It was first built in 1960 by Theodore Maiman at the Hughes Research Laboratories. And interestingly enough, my senior project in college, I'm a physics major, was based on lasers.
I still have the hole in my finger.
No. It was like sending lasers through crystals to see if they would pulse and have certain optical properties. It really was not exciting. It did not do anything, and it certainly was not a directed energy weapon.
Well, it could have been.
And the experiment had been done before. It was like replicating an old experiment, so I couldn't even write a paper on it. It was so sad.
You're just an undergrad.
I was just
at a school that didn't have a huge budget. So what are you supposed to do, right?
I know. They didn't even have a graduate program. So lasers have a lot of uses. They do industrial cutting, optical communications, CD players, LiDAR, surgery, and blinding your friends and more.
Exactly.
I always had to be very careful in the lab.
Yeah. Well, I didn't take notes on this, but there's all sorts of stuff I read about. A lot of the lasers that they use in laboratories for scientific reasons are actually quite powerful. And just getting light scattered from those, not even direct light, but even scattered light can damage your eyesight. So you have to be really careful with those. Those are like high grade stuff.
Yeah, I always had to wear specialized goggles. And even then it was like, don't look into the laser.
Right.
Don't touch the laser.
Yeah.
Turn off the laser before you do ABC.
I didn't take notes on it, but it's actually pretty interesting how they actually get these lasers to work. There's all sorts of different types of lasers, like how they get that wavelength concentrated kind of a thing. There's like chemical lasers, there's ion lasers, I don't know, whatever. There's masers, there's all kinds of crazy stuff.
This was back in the late 90s when there weren't...
Okay, keep going.
This was back in the late 90s, so there were only certain kinds of lasers available, especially at a lower grad college level.
Right.
And it wasn't very powerful.
Yeah, well, like I'm saying, I didn't take notes on it because it's not
No, I'm just saying lasers have certainly become more prevalent, widespread, and dangerous and available since then.
Yeah, for sure. And I was just saying there's a whole bunch of different types of them. So
Yes.
if that stuff is interesting to you, dear listener, go ahead and check it out and have a read because it's pretty fascinating stuff. Again, I didn't take notes for that because it's not really relevant to our show, but it was still pretty interesting to read about that.
Except maybe do they exist in weaponized form?
Well, yeah, they absolutely do. And I have a couple of examples to talk about. For instance, the Boeing YAL-1. I remember reading about a version of this a while ago. It was probably the predecessor to this, but basically the idea is you take a 747, you attach a big giant laser, and then you use it to shoot down ICBMs. So the Boeing YAL-1, or YALI, I guess you could say, that's a little bit more recent than, the article I read about this was in Aviation Week, probably in the early 2000s, but this one's a little more recent than that. Since the 80s, though, they've been researching using an airplane to shoot down ICBMs with a laser. The program was ultimately canceled, not because it didn't work. It absolutely worked. In fact, you can find some video footage of them testing the laser to shoot down a test missile.
Well, it sounds absolutely believable.
Yeah. Oh, it's real. It's 100% real, for sure. It absolutely worked. It was effective. However, it was extremely expensive and thus not viable. It would have been something like $500 million per aircraft. And the laser didn't have long enough range. So they would have had to, like if they're shooting down missiles being shot from Iraq, the plane would have to fly over Iraq, So probably every year it would cost them $1 million to operate each airplane.
And even our government only has so much for defense.
Right. So, like I said, this has been studied since the 80s, and that project ended up costing from the 80s to when they closed it down, which I forgot to notate that, but I think it was something like 2011 or, somewhat recently. That total cost of the program was $5 billion for a project that ended up going nowhere. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Your tax dollars at work.
Yeah.
However, they did develop technologies in this program that went on to other things. So they still use the technology they developed there. It's just not being used for the original purpose. Now, the reason why something like that doesn't seem that nefarious at first, but actually, if we had some sort of missile defense that could shoot down more than 90% of incoming ICBMs, whoever has that between us or Russia during the Cold War anyways, would have given that side a decisive advantage because then you could strike them and they would not be able to strike back. So you could just wipe them out anytime you wanted to.
Is that not Israel's Iron Dome? Don't they use lasers on that?
I believe that's part of it.
Yeah.
They use a multifaceted.
They do. They have like different levels. It's fascinating to me.
They have intercept missiles. They have like ground artillery or ground machine guns that will spray a whole bunch of bullets into the air to shoot down incoming stuff. I believe they do have lasers as well. They have multiple things for multiple targets. Yeah. It's pretty incredible how small that country is and how good they are at defending it against outside threats.
Yes. But we will not discuss politics on this show.
It's like the size of a city or something. It's like really small.
Yeah, it's very small.
Tiny. Yeah, we don't want to get into that. That's not what our show's about. Our show's about fun conspiracies. Sometimes depressing ones, but usually fun. But so, yeah, any side that had complete defensive capabilities would give them a decisive advantage over their opponent. And that's why researching these things, why they were willing to put so much money into it, because it would win the war and it would allow you to dominate the entire world. But on the other, that makes me think, like they said, okay, we put $5 billion into it, but we just scrapped the airplane and turned it into nothing. If they developed it and deployed it, they wouldn't tell you, because if the enemy knew about it, then they could defeat it. So they might have lasers on airplanes for shooting down missiles, and we just don't know about it.
All airplanes, especially the ones that have chemtrails.
Yes. Yeah, that's what the chemtrails are from. They're from the lasers.
I read there was a plane, it was a jet, that dumped fuel on a school recently.
They do that in case of emergency. They don't like to do it because fuel is extremely expensive, and it's also a no-no. They get penalized and stuff. They only do that if they absolutely have to. Like if the airplane's about to crash and they need to re-land, but they just took off and the airplane has a maximum landing weight, and if it has a full tank of fuel, it cannot land.
I did not know that.
It depends on it's different for different airplanes, but a lot of airplanes, if you fill it all the way up to fuel, like let's say it's flying from Los Angeles to Singapore, they're going to load that sucker up with fuel, and they're anticipating that by the time they get to Singapore or wherever they're going, that they're going to have burned off a lot of their fuel, so that'll get rid of a lot of the weight.
That always makes me nervous on an airplane. I have to admit, if we get delayed, are we going to run out of fuel?
No.
I still understand that, but I'm like,
No, and if it burned off enough fuel, they would just put in more.
So last time I flew, this is crazy. Just short diversion here, I promise.
Mm-hmm.
There was a medical emergency on the plane, and they had an overhead announcement. If there's any trained, certified medical professionals on board the plane, please let the stewardesses know.
Did you say, I have my CPR license?
No, I did not. I am not qualified to help anyone on the plane. We did not divert. So it must not have been bad.
Yeah. So the next question that a lot of people have when it comes to directed energy weapons is, do we have them in space? Well, we definitely have space lasers. We know that for a fact because NASA uses lasers to communicate. In fact, some of our far-off satellites will use a very narrow beam laser, a very effective laser, for communicating because they can do so at a very narrow beam with a very low amount of energy. So it's extremely effective for communications, for sending signals. But do we have weapons? That we don't know. If we do have weapons in space, it's classified.
I don't know. We have the Space Corps. So maybe we do have weapons in space.
Yeah, and I didn't take notes on it, but I did read about in the 80s, Russia was developing a space pistol for their people. Why you wouldn't need a space pistol unless you're expecting to be fighting out in outer space?
That would be crazy.
Yeah.
Astronauts in space.
Who knows? Maybe there's secret space wars going on right now. We just don't know about it.
Planet.
Yeah. They don't talk about it because it's like bad publicity. So they just keep it on the DL. So there was one space weapon I read about that's absolutely terrifying that physicists have been talking about for years. Apparently, it's possible to nudge a space rock towards a particular city and wipe out an entire city.
That makes sense to me because they talk about nudging it away from the Earth.
Yeah, and we know that, for instance, if there's an asteroid that's going to hit the Earth, they have several ways of deflecting it. For instance, they could use a large magnifying glass and concentrate the sun onto a little point. The off-gassing would not deflect it that much, but it would deflect it enough to where it wouldn't hit the Earth.
Maybe.
So you only have to nudge it just a little bit to change its trajectory sometimes. So if there was a space rock, you could just kind of just poke it a little, just poke, and then boom, bye-bye Moscow,
Why Moscow?
Well, because that's our enemy during the Cold War.
I see. Okay.
When a lot of this stuff was being developed. But they do have, I don't think I put it in my notes, but they do have satellites almost certainly. I know it was researched. They didn't say whether it's been deployed, but they researched dropping like tungsten rods down from orbit, and the kinetic energy would do a lot of damage. So they just go plop, just drop it from orbit. It hurtles down to Earth and just smashes an entire area.
Wow.
Isn't that scary?
Well, in this climate, everything's scary.
Yeah, they do have a lot of terrifying weapons. That's true. I mean, we have weapons where, our Navy can launch a cruise missile or fire a cannon from like halfway around the planet and then hit anything with like the accuracy of a quarter, probably. I don't know. Pretty terrifying stuff. Have you heard of the Star Wars program?
I think we've mentioned it on a previous podcast.
Yeah, this was a program to put laser-based space platforms to shoot down ICBMs. Again, it was another defense program against, the evil Russians. It was ultimately canceled after spending $30 billion between, 1984 and throughout the early 90s when it was eventually canceled. And if you adjust for inflation, depending on what inflation calculator you use, that's pretty much like all of the money today.
All the
All
monies.
of it. Yeah. I looked it up just to put this amount in perspective. In 1984, the federal government collected $11 billion in taxes. So they spent 3 times 1 year's tax revenue just on this one project that ended up not working at all. This was an epic boondoggle for President Reagan, and it was lambasted then, and it has been lambasted since.
Huh.
Also in 1984, what happened? Do you know what else happened in 1984?
I have a feeling you're going to tell me.
Well, it's in my notes, so you probably can see it. Van Halen released one of their best albums, 1984. It's got Jump, Panama, Hot for Teacher, Top Jimmy, Drop Dead Legs. It's a fantastic album. If you guys haven't heard it, I recommend it since we're talking about 1984. So Star Wars would be a whole episode on its own, maybe better for a history podcast. I don't know. But I find it hard to believe that they spent that much money and didn't achieve something, right? So I wonder if they were able to deploy satellites that could shoot down ICBMs, and they just publicly said, oh, you know what? It doesn't work. We're canceling it. When in reality, the satellites are actually up there. Because if we said, oh yeah, it works, here's what our satellites look like, this is their orbital paths, it'd be real easy to disable those satellites. Satellites would be very easy targets for an enemy nation.
Yeah. I know Trump talked about the Golden Dome, which is similar to the Israeli Iron Dome, except it's a modern version of the Star Wars program, which would rely on just satellites with directed energy weapons, and in addition to the multi-layered approach. But it would cost upwards of $800 billion, which we don't have right now.
Yeah, that's an insane amount of money. But I looked up our tax revenue, and our tax revenue has gone up quite a lot over the years as well.
Is it $800 billion?
Yeah, it's like 1 point something trillion or something every year.
That is crazy.
Yeah, and still they manage to be in a massive deficit every year.
I know.
But yeah, still, it's going to be expensive. And I'm not sure that we need a Golden Dome. Do we need a Golden Dome?
It'll be pretty.
Is Russia still going to hit us with nukes?
I don't know.
Well, that's true. I guess Putin does seem a little unhinged sometimes.
I fear for our lives. So yeah. I don't know. We live in strange times.
Just one more tangent. There's a movie that kind of pokes fun at the Cold War and the Star Wars program called Spies Like Us.
Good movie. Good movie.
I was watching it just the other day after I was taking notes for this episode because I said, oh, I remember that movie. I haven't watched that in a long time. It's a really silly 80s comedy starring none other than the godfather of this podcast, Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase. Has some really cool cameos like Bob Hope and even a cameo by the legendary Ray Harryhausen. What's up, Agent Ether?
I can't reach my kombucha.
Ugh.
Hold on.
You're better off.
Hold on.
Yeah, it's got a lot of great one-liners. I don't want to spoil any of them, but probably the best known is Doctor. It's pretty funny. Good stuff. So I don't want to spoil that movie. It's a cloak and dagger kind of a thing. Absolutely hilarious.
My favorite scene is the test scene.
Yes. Say no more. Have you heard of particle cannons?
Hold on.
Oh yeah, these dogs are laying on your cables there still.
Okay, particle cannons. No.
A particle cannon or a particle beam weapon uses high energy beam of atomic or subatomic particles to damage the target by disrupting its atomic and or molecular structure. That sounds crazy, right?
Hold on, I'm enjoying my kombucha.
Ugh.
Agent Anderson got this for me. It's Mystic Mango. It's very good for you.
Is it really, though?
It is. It has all these probiotics and prebiotics, and it's delicious, so you can't lose.
That's not an advertisement, by the way. Agent Ether just really loves kombucha. We have not gotten any money from this company.
Well, I didn't say the brand. I just said I liked it. No, I didn't.
I thought you did.
No, I said it has probiotics and prebiotics, and the kind is Mystic Mango.
Oh,
This
okay.
is the brand.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I didn't say the brand.
Well, good, because no free advertising on this show. No, I'm just kidding. I don't really care that much. So there's a couple of other directed energy weapons, such as an electro laser that first ionizes its target path and then sends an electric current down the conducting track of ionized plasma.
And then shrinks people.
No.
Oh.
Somewhat like lightning, it functions as a giant high-energy, long-distance version of the taser or stun gun. Isn't that wild?
Which then shrinks people.
Nope, nobody gets shrunk.
Okay.
But the point is that they have all sorts of these. I didn't take notes on each and every one of them. I just wanted to use a few examples of things that are real and actually exist. Have you heard about electromagnetic pulse weapons?
Yes.
Well, we have a definition here.
No.
Would you like to read it?
No, I first want to say it was in The Matrix.
Yes, it was. That's true.
It was in The Matrix twice.
And that's a real thing.
That's really cool. So it's also called a transient electromagnetic disturbance, or a TED. And you have this brief burst of electromagnetic energy, which makes sense. So the origin can be natural or artificial. It can occur as a electromagnetic field, an electric field, or a magnetic field, or as a conducted electric circuit.
Current.
Circuit. I don't have on my reading glasses. I do the best I can. The interference can disrupt communications and damage electronic equipment, as in The Matrix. A lightning strike can physically damage objects such as buildings and aircraft. How does that work? So you have a natural EMP? That's really cool.
Yeah, that can happen.
And the management of EMP effects is a branch of the electromagnetic compatibility, or EMC engineering, which I've never heard of.
Yeah, me neither. But they have whole divisions of the military and divisions of government that I've never even heard of for dealing with this kind of stuff.
It's just like you hear about the main branches. You hear civil, mechanical, and electrical engineering. I've never heard of electromagnetic compatibility engineering.
I wonder if it's a subset of something else.
It must be.
Yeah.
It must be. The first recorded damage from an electromagnetic pulse came with the solar storm in August 1859, or the Carrington event.
And what's so scary about the Carrington event is, we've probably mentioned it before on the show, but that was an event of such a magnitude. It was basically a solar storm, like a sun, what do they call it? Not sunspot, but the
solar flare.
Solar flare, there it is. It was so powerful that in today's day and age, it would fry all the computers. It would wipe out our electric grid. It would hit the reset button on society. It would be chaos, be, dogs and cats living together.
Street. It reminds me of the movie we just watched with Agent Egg. What movie was that?
Oh, yeah. The
something family versus the machines.
Yeah.
Like the Henderson family versus the
yes.
machines. And that's like the whole plot of the movie.
Yeah.
Basically.
More or less, yeah.
More or less. Yeah. Well, the plot of the movie is not directed energy weapons. It's a massive event in which people have no Wi-Fi, and then there's like rioting in the streets. But it's done in a comedic sort of way because it is a children's movie.
Mm-hmm. So in modern times, they actually have EMP weapons, which I don't know if it's technically a directed energy weapon, but it sure as heck seems like it to me. They can be created by high-altitude nuclear detonation, and here's an excerpt. A nuclear electromagnetic pulse is a burst of electromagnetic radiation created by a nuclear explosion. The resulting rapidly varying electric and magnetic fields may couple with electrical and electronic systems to produce damaging current and voltage surges. The specific characteristics of particular nuclear EMP event vary according to a number of factors, the most important of which is the altitude of the detonation. So, in other words, if they detonate a nuclear bomb high up in the altitude, it can disrupt or destroy electronics for a very large, like thousands of miles in some cases.
And yet another way to end civilization.
Yeah, like if you detonated just one nuclear bomb in the correct place over the United States, you could wipe out the entire United States electronic grid with just one bomb.
Right.
So, yeah, I think we're probably everybody's vulnerable to this kind of an attack.
That's why we need a golden dome.
Yeah, exactly, right. But an EMP, it's such high altitude though that I'm not sure a golden dome would even, because you could detonate it basically in space and it would still work. Scary, right?
One more thing to worry about.
Yeah, exactly.
Moving on.
Yeah. And they use this idea in the movie Escape from LA. I don't want to give any spoilers, so I won't talk about that specifically, but I've seen it in other movies too. So that's just a couple of the directed energy weapons out there. There are many, many more. There are lots of these things out there. They exist. They are real. So that was the first part, is to establish if they're real or if they exist. Yes, they do, and they have existed for decades. So that question answered. The second question is, have they been used for anything
nefarious?
Yeah. Something perhaps that they might not want us to know about? And the answer, of course, is yes. Let's see. How's our time here? Okay, so let's skip this stuff about the Nazis. Because
I think that you should just leave that in the podcast so that people are like, what part about the Nazis? So don't edit that.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to edit that. So I took notes about the Nazis who researched a bunch of directed energy weapons. We're going to skip that because we got a lot of stuff to cover here today.
Okay, hold on. I am scrolling down. Okay, go.
And there's another weapon here from 1973 that was used against people, and there were political prisoners in East Germany that had X-rays used on them at high doses that gave them cancer. That was what they're trying to do. Let's go ahead and skip some of that stuff. The United States used directed energy weapons during the Iraq War, but that's all classified. So let's skip through all that stuff so we can get ahead to some of the conspiracies, or, conspiracy adjacent. So we've talked about the Havana Syndrome recently. We did a whole episode on it. But hilariously, the wiki article on directed, some of the stuff, you can look at Wikipedia for a good summary of this stuff. The article on directed energy weapons debunks the whole thing. They basically say the Havana Syndrome's bullshit, paraphrasing. But in the very next section after that, they list the symptoms of a non-lethal directed energy weapon: difficulty breathing, disorientation, nausea, pain, vertigo, other systematic discomfort, and that they can also target the central nervous system and cause neurophysiological disorders. In other words, 100% of what people reported in the Havana Syndrome.
Well, it sounds like what they're saying is that there wasn't a Havana Syndrome incident, but these are the side effects.
Yeah, no, but the reason it's ironic because they quote one study that I believe it was the study where they didn't even interview any of the victims. And that study basically said, yeah, nothing to see here, nothing to worry about. It's all a bunch of bullshit.
I see.
And that's what Wikipedia quotes. They don't quote any of the actual evidence for it. But and then the very next section, they list directed energy weapons that do the exact same thing that all of these Havana Syndrome victims were reporting. So they're like, yeah, this is fake, but this other thing's real, but it just hasn't been used on anybody yet. I just thought it was kind of funny, that juxtaposition there. Wikipedia tends to be overwhelmingly skeptical on any topic, no matter what. It depends, not necessarily 100% of the time, but most of the time. So anyways, there was a little blurb I found on the Black Vault. They didn't have much on directed energy weapons, but on September 16th, 2020, Defense Secretary Mark Esper said at a conference that Russia and China had deployed directed energy weapons in space, and he also said that the U.S. would respond by modernizing our weapons. And his answer was like, yeah, we're building airplanes and we're doing, technology and stuff. It was pretty vague. But he basically said that we would be responding is what he was basically saying. Like, yeah, we're going to do this too, essentially. Although it's against international treaties to have lasers in space for weapons. So he didn't say that specifically. Now, just think about this. They could have a very narrow beam laser on a satellite right now that could hit you with pinpoint accuracy. So if they wanted to target you, you could be walking down the street, somebody could press a button that could pulse a laser for half a second, boom. Now you're a piece of ash on the ground. You're a pile of ash.
I don't want to be ash.
The technology for this exists. The only question is whether or not it's been deployed. Isn't that wild?
I don't see piles of ash when I walk around. I think we might be okay.
Well, it's because the wind blows it away.
Oh, okay.
Well, something like this, they wouldn't use it unless they had to, because once the cat's out of the bag, then the enemy has to respond in some way. So they're very unlikely to do that. So there are some theories that things like HAARP, we did a whole episode on HAARP, that have been used for weather control. In general, anytime there's a weather pattern such as hurricanes, people say that this hurricane or that tornado, whatever, is being caused by some kind of energy weapon like HAARP. I didn't find any evidence whatsoever to support this. I looked and I didn't find any. It's just a conspiracy.
I'm glad you think so. I'll have to agree with you there.
Yeah.
I was ready to debate you on that one because I actually do get annoyed when people are like, oh, it's the worst hurricane season ever because of scientific interference. I'm like, that is one hell of a conspiracy.
Well, you never know.
I know.
Science makes miracles happen. So you never know what somebody's going to be able to develop. They have researched weather modification and weather control for really a long time, for years and years, decades at the very least. So who knows? It's essentially, it's possible that they've developed something to control weather, but I was not able to find anything specific to support that for this particular topic.
Just as an aside, we are very lucky. There's like some sort of cold front and the Arctic waters are extra cool this summer. And this is like the coolest summer we've had in decades.
We had like a few days over 100.
Yeah.
And
other than that, it's been like the 70s.
Handful of days in the 90s. Yeah, other than that, the entire summer has been in the 70s. It's been lovely. Oh man, I love it.
Yeah. So I had mentioned space lasers.
Oh, not just space lasers.
At the beginning. I know. And
they're Jewish space lasers.
And we've actually mentioned it before because it gets under my skin. So there's a politician. I don't even know if we should mention her again. And she popularized this idea, I think on social media, that space lasers started the California fires in 2018. Now, I think that was the year where there was tons of dry lightning. Like the whole family went outside and we just watched from the sky all this dry lightning come down. It was insane.
Yeah.
Anyways, the idea was they were controlled and funded by various Jewish entities, such as the
Rothschild.
Yeah.
So Marte G didn't specifically say that it was a Jewish conspiracy, but all of the people or entities she named were Jewish. So, she also has a history of saying white supremacist type stuff and saying really bizarre and nasty things like her political opponents should be assassinated. And that's not just fun and games. There are people out there who take this stuff very seriously. And if you are a follower of that politician, you might hear that and think, okay, so what she's saying is she needs somebody to go do this for her. I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility. So it's not just a bad thing to say. It's also a dangerous thing to say.
Yeah, again, not a political show, but I really just don't like this woman. So the point is that we were here for the fires, personally, the whole family, and I did not see any blue beams of energy coming down. I literally just saw, my poor plants getting blown down. I had these gorgeous sunflowers in like red and yellow, just torn apart from the wind. We had these huge oak leaves that were just ash. We had hurricane speed winds. It was incredibly dry because we were in the middle of a drought, like years and years of drought. And these embers would just jump miles and light up a whole neighborhood. And then spaces in between would be unaffected. We've talked about this before. It was a crazy fire.
Yeah, we have mentioned this before on the show.
So there's no evidence to support this. It doesn't mean it didn't happen, I suppose, but we certainly can't prove it.
Well, there are some pictures.
Yeah, you go on about your pictures. I'm going to read ahead in my notes.
So there are some pictures of beams of energy coming down on things that are on fire, but all of these pictures that I could find have either been debunked. For instance, there's a picture of a rocket launch. A rocket launch leaves a trail of gas behind that can glow, and in this case, it looks like a beam coming down from the sky, but it's just a SpaceX rocket launch. So there's stuff like that. The ones that are not easy to debunk have actually been debunked as Photoshop jobs. There are also pictures of like a car with melted tires and plastic, but there's no like fire nearby. There's nothing burnt near it. Those are explained because when you have a whole region on fire, it gets extremely hot. Hot enough, in fact, to melt a car at a reasonable distance.
Yeah, I used to work at an area in those fires, and during the fires, the crews, the emergency crews, were able to save the hospital. Everywhere around it was burnt. And the hospital inside actually was so hot, it was over 110 degrees. So no fire in the hospital, but it was so bad they had to go through the hospital and throw away all of the equipment and get new equipment, like everything.
And like the underground pipes melted and stuff like that. So it was
wires, the electric wires came off the poles, even poles that weren't, burnt. Yeah, it was just really hot.
And props to the firefighters who saved that hospital, because that was quite the feat. That hospital is literally smack dab in the middle of a forest on a hill in hard to get to places, and they somehow managed to save the hospital.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. All right, so the next conspiracy we have involving directed energy weapons. I've also mentioned this one before on the show. It's the dustification of the buildings on 9/11. Have you heard of this one, Agent Ether?
No, I'm not a big fan of 9/11 conspiracies, so I have not heard of this one.
This one is by Dr. Judy Wood, who is a former mechanical engineering professor who became one of the more controversial figures because of her ideas about 9/11 and how it happened. She says the controlled demolition is not a thing, and she's even gone as far as to debunk that. What she says is that the buildings, the Twin Towers, were dustified, possibly by an orbital direct energy weapon. That's right, a laser from space. I've seen one of her lectures, and she does make a good argument, but most of her argument relies on a video where if you watch this video of the tower collapsing, it looks like it's turning into dust. Skeptics have explained this by saying that it's not turning to dust. What's happening is the parts of the building are falling down, and the dust that was on them is like staying in the air. So it looks like it's turning to dust, but it's not. However, when you watch these videos, it kind of makes you wonder, is this really turning to dust? Is there a space laser?
It doesn't make me wonder.
You haven't seen the video.
It doesn't matter.
You won't even watch the video.
I won't. I am so much of a skeptic that Agent Anderson is always talking about these people who are so skeptical they refuse to look at the evidence.
That's you when it comes to 9/11.
That is me when it comes to 9/11. I'm just like, I'm not doing this. Or have we been to the moon?
Well, yeah, that one's. But what about the indestructible passport?
The what now?
The indestructible passport.
I've never heard of that.
All right. Well, yeah, there is evidence for 9/11. We've done 2 episodes on it, and we could do more, but I figure we've already made the point. But there actually, believe it or not, is some evidence. At the very least, it is 100% a fact that the intelligence community knew ahead of time that there was going to be an attack. That has been proven. That is not controversial. They knew about it ahead of time, and there were people who worked to stop preventing it. But these are facts. These are not wild theories, but we already did a couple episodes on it, so we don't need to go on about that here. Let's get back to the dustification. So she says, Dr. Wood says that because there wasn't enough debris to account for all of the mass in the building. That means that the mass was dustified and carried off by the wind. In other words, it was just disintegrated. She also says that seismic sensors should have registered a much larger spike when the building fell because of how much mass there was in the building, but the spike was much smaller than expected. So that again means that the towers were disintegrated or dustified. So she has other arguments, other points. She has some pretty interesting videos, and she also has a book that she published called Where Did the Towers Go? Evidence of Directed Free Energy Technology on 9/11, which she argues it's a hefty book. It's over 500 pages, and it comes in at a mere $50 on Amazon. So right away for me, anybody selling a very expensive book to get their point across kind of makes your spidey senses tingle, a little bit.
Are her lectures on YouTube free?
Yes, she does have free lectures on YouTube. At least she used to. I don't know if they've been taken down. I mean, I looked at this years ago. Apologies, our cryptids are going berserk as they do 100% of the time as soon as we hit record, but the show must go on. What can you do? These little guys. So yeah, this is a pretty wacky theory on the surface. The buildings were disintegrated by space lasers. But the fun part of it is she does present some evidence that on the surface at least seems plausible. On the other hand, she's trying to sell an expensive book. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this. If I had to put money on it, I would put money on it not being true. But it's still a fun theory. It's an interesting theory.
All right, moving on from 9/11, because I don't want to talk about it anymore. Let's talk about something way more fascinating, mind control. Specifically, of course, mind control and directed energy weapon theories. So one is that you can have microwave hearing and voice to skull, or V2K. Some declassified U.S. military research shows that microwaves can create auditory sensations, which is called the Frey effect. So conspiracy theorists claimed that the government agencies, weaponize this effect to send voices into people's heads. And this is known as synthetic telepathy. So they might hear commands or feel harassed or just hear nonstop voices. Sounds like schizophrenia to me.
Well, the crazy thing about this one is that there's actually a basis in science for this one. Now, we don't have proof that it's been deployed as an actual weapon, but we do know that these effects can be caused. This is 100% real.
So beyond hearing voices, you can also get influencing emotions, thoughts, behaviors. They can have effects like anger, depression, suicidal thoughts, confusion, and compulsions.
Yeah, just by beaming an energy into your head.
Well, the whole hearing voices thing, I can see how that would have all of those effects.
Right.
If you're hearing voices all the time and they're telling you to do things, you might think you're crazy.
Even, I imagine this effect might be even that you might not hear specific words. You might just hear like voices.
Noises. And
it sounds like somebody talking. You can't really hear what the words are, but you can hear like people talking when there's nobody there, like that kind of stuff. That would really freak you out. But they can actually affect your emotions too. Now, this is a little different, but we've talked about it before. Infrasound has been shown to cause a feeling of unease in some people. Not everybody, but the right frequency of infrasound can make people feel uneasy and paranoid. And again, this is based in science, and that's what makes this one. This one sounds like the craziest one here, but it's actually, there is somewhat of a basis for it. Now, again, I'm not saying it's ever been deployed or used on people, but it does have a basis in science.
Now, I don't understand this. How could governments suppress dissent using this weapon?
Well, if you have a group of people protesting, let's say something that the government did that the government wants to do and people don't want them to, and you have record number of protesters coming out on the streets, all the government would have to do, see, the government doesn't want to kill them, right? Because they need citizens to rule over, to pay taxes, for society to function. But instead, you could just beam this at people to freak them out and cause them to disperse. And you could possibly also use it excessively on any particular leaders to make them go crazy. Because if a person is assassinated by the government, well, that's only going to make things worse. It's only going to motivate people more. But if that leader loses their mind and goes crazy and does weird stuff, then that kind of diffuses the whole situation. I think that's the basic idea behind it.
I'm having trouble, I don't know, believing this, because how close would you have to get to someone? And how widespread, and how would this weapon be created? But you do have a lot of people who think they've been targeted, and online those are called TIs. There's a targeted individuals community, and they believe they are being harassed with these directed energy weapons. They report symptoms like burning skin, ringing in the ears, which is tinnitus, brain zaps or sudden shocks, sleep disruption and fatigue, hearing voices, or forced dreams.
Also very similar to the Havana syndrome. And we know that if you listen back on the Havana syndrome, we know that these weapons were developed in some cases, and that things such as pulsed microwave radiation can go hundreds of yards, and these weapons can be deployed in a package that's as small as a backpack, so they're easy to conceal and move around. Although the more common ones were used from like the back of a van or something. So we know these things exist, and we know that they've been developed. We don't necessarily have proof that they've been deployed on a large scale. But I think the main point here is that we have a history where we know for a fact that our government is willing to test biological agents, chemical agents on the population without them knowing. So that makes it plausible that if they had such a device or weapon that could use directed energy to cause effects like this, that they would also be willing to use that as well. I don't see any reason why they would hesitate if they found it somehow beneficial to whatever they were trying to achieve. So the types of technology they say might have been used are things like microwave weapons, extremely low frequency waves, scalar weapons, or Tesla-based tech, which is more of like an exotic thing that doesn't really exist, and things like HARP, which, you know, pops up a lot when you're talking about directed energy weapons. And the thing about HARP is that it was highly classified at one point, so that creates this air of mystery around it. We don't know exactly what they were doing with it, but it was very classified, so it makes it a really easy target for conspiracy theories. All right. Next up, there's the idea that a lot of crashed UFO reports or crash retrievals were not accidents. They were not a malfunctioning UFO, but rather it was on purpose. We used a directed energy weapon, whether it's a beefed up radar array or a laser beam or whatever, to actually shoot down the UFOs. The most common cases this is attributed to are Roswell, where the main story is that it's a crashed weather balloon, but we actually have a press release from the military saying it was a downed flying saucer, or a crashed flying saucer at the very least. And for this one, it could have been some kind of radar, which radar, if you amp it up enough, could potentially or theoretically cause trouble for electronic devices. So I suppose it's possible. Another case that predates Roswell that we've actually done on this show is the Battle of Los Angeles.
That was a fun one.
That was a while ago. Yeah, I remember Braden came on for that one. That was a good time. Braden from Alien Theorists Theorizing, soon to be Theorists Theorizing. They're changing their show's name because they want to do more topics, I guess, than just aliens. Actually, they have been doing for a long time. Anyways, so they're saying that they actually brought down the UFO here. But this one I'm not so sure about because, as far as I'm aware, nothing crashed. Well, actually, that's not true. There were things that crashed, but it's not one of the more popular crash retrieval cases, even though there are stories in this incident where people say some kind of ship did crash or, craft did crash. There's Soviet UFO encounters where Russian UFO researchers claimed that their government tested laser and particle beam weapons against UFOs and were able to bring those down. Unfortunately, there's a language barrier there, so it's a lot harder to substantiate that kind of thing. The Cash Landrum incident, which we've done an episode on that, and the witnesses saw, just to remind you, the witnesses saw a diamond-shaped craft, and the craft were surrounded by a bunch of helicopters, military helicopters. The idea is that it was disabled by a directed energy weapons test because they said that it looked like it was having trouble flying, and the witnesses suffered radiation burns. So that's another one where they think it might be the case. The earlier mentioned SDI or Star Wars program is thought by some people to be a directed energy weapon used against UFOs rather than ballistic missiles. And there are people who have gone into more depth than that. This is just like a real quick list. There's another one in Colares, Brazil, Operation Prato. We've also done an episode on that.
We've done a lot of episodes.
Yeah, we have done quite a lot at this point. I think we're approaching or near 230 regular episodes. And gosh, I don't even know how many bonus episodes. Probably 200 more bonus episodes. We've done a lot. Yeah, for sure. So Colares, Brazil, or Operation Prato, where witnesses saw beams of light that came from the UFOs and burned people. So that's a reverse one where the UFOs are using directed energy weapons on people. But also some people speculate that perhaps we were testing weapons on the UFOs as well, and maybe the UFOs were fighting back. I don't know. So there's more, but that's the basic gist of it, is that we're using lasers to take down UFOs. And just as a side, like some of these cases, Cash Landrum and Operation Prato, there are plenty of other cases where there are effects that could be attributed to a directed energy weapon being used on the witnesses by the UFO, like cars and airplanes that stop working all of a sudden, people reporting, burns, radiation burns, and physical effects, stuff like that. So anything's possible.
And getting closer to the end here, kind of wrapping up, we wanted to talk about Tesla and his death ray, aka Teleforce.
The most legendary directed energy weapon.
So this was back in the 1930s. He called it Teleforce, but the press nicknamed it a death ray. So it wasn't a laser because they didn't exist until the 1960s, but it was a device that could shoot a stream of tiny high-speed particles. So micron-sized tungsten pellets or maybe mercury ions using electrostatic repulsion, so physics.
This guy was so ahead of his time, right?
Yeah, he really was. So he described it as a charged particle beam capable of knocking down airplanes at hundreds of miles away. Now, mind you, he described it as, it doesn't say he created it.
Yeah.
But his vision was that it would be a peace ray. He thought if every nation had one, war would become impossible.
Right.
Not that we would enter into a Cold War, but that, there would be no war. So he offered it to the US, the UK, the Soviet Union, but nobody took it seriously. And of course, when he died, we talked about this before. And I told Agent Anderson, I'm pretty sure we did an episode on Tesla.
Did we do a whole episode on Tesla?
I think we did. Or as part of another episode.
Let me check my feed. I know we've mentioned him before.
But I remember talking about how when he died in 1943, the FBI and the Office of Alien Property seized his papers. Like, all of them.
Yes, who knows what was in there.
The blueprints for Teleforce. So other Tesla concepts tied to these conspiracies. We talked about the Wardenclyffe Tower before, where he experimented with electricity through the air using specific resonant frequencies. So there's, the idea is maybe these could be adapted to long-range energy beams like modern microwave weapons. All right, there's also this idea that the Earth has a resonant frequency, and Tesla claimed he could make the Earth ring like a bell with that resonant frequency. So that was tied to tectonic weapons, where maybe you could use electromagnetic waves to trigger earthquakes
Right.
or volcanic eruptions.
Isn't that wild?
It's so wild as to be unbelievable.
Yeah, but Tesla did things that were impossible. So you never know.
You
That
never
guy was so far ahead of his time that it seems like he was a time traveler from the future.
Tesla also created lightning bolts in his Colorado Springs lab. They were 40 feet long. Now, I find this fascinating because from a young age, I was just shocked. Get it? Shocked by lightning.
Shocked, I tell you.
I actually watched this video with Agent Egg about lightning, and I was floored by the different types of lightning, the lightning patterns, and how lightning interacted in the atmosphere. We're talking about something that's really complex, and he just creates it in a lab.
Yeah.
So the idea is among conspiracy theorists that, you could have targeted lightning strikes.
Right. So that's kind of the idea for Tesla's stuff. He had several things that could be considered directed energy weapons of one kind or another. I doubt any of them have ever been deployed as directed energy weapons, but his death ray at the very least was a precursor to things like lasers and particle beams that later on were invented. So he basically invented the particle beam like decades and decades before anybody else had even imagined it. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Like this guy was so far ahead of his time that he was inventing stuff that it took other people like 50 years to come up with. It's pretty wild. So I think that's why it's easy to attribute anything you want to Tesla, because he was so far ahead of his peers in a lot of topics that you could come up with any number of wild conspiracy theories and pin it on Tesla. I'm not saying any of them are true. I'm just saying it's kind of fun to speculate about stuff. All right. Well, I think that's all we've got for you this time. Thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time,
Keep it strange.